Let's see what's going on.
Misconduct and all the rest. We'll get into it. Plus, the government
Ben
shutdown is
Shapiro
coming to
here.
an end. Who won? Who lost? First, we have less than 2,000 Daily Wire lifetime memberships remaining. Turns out, having all access benefits for life with no renewals is something everyone wants. So here are your options. BBC Director General Tim Davie and BBC News Chief Executive Deborah Turnitz said they were leaving the organization following criticism from the White House. Now, what exactly happened here? Well, there was a news program. It's their flagship investigative news program over at the BBC. It's called Panorama, and it ran 1 week before the 2024 United States election. Now, you can say to yourself, did that affect the election? President Trump won. Doesn't matter. The job of the BBC is to actually cover the news, not make the news up. So what did they do? Well, 1 week before the election, they ran a piece in which they spliced together things that President Trump said.
Yeah, I saw this. It's diabolical. They spliced together like two completely different parts of the speech effectively to make it seem as though he's inciting them to violence when it was like what he said. Don't get me wrong. Like there are things that happened that day that I certainly don't agree with, but when they completely mischaracterized the whole thing, and in this point, this is like slander, I feel, because it's like when you directly clip somebody's wordage together into meaning something that it very clearly does not, right? That's slander. So I think that's why this video is labeled Trump's threatening to sue the BBC, and I very much think he should. We need to set a standard for this going forward. You can't be clipping people like this and clipping their words into something else entirely. It's crazy.
On January 6th, 2021, to make it look as though he himself personally was leading an armed insurrection at the...
And it's like, if you're gonna do that, be ready for the fucking, for the reaction of people when they realize the actual content and that you lied about it.
Capitol building. And that, of course, was not true. In order to achieve this effect, they had to cut out full-on 24 pages of material. They cut from one part of the speech, and then they fast-forwarded 50 minutes, 50 minutes, and cut together the last part of the speech and clipped those together, and then basically put in ellipses in order to make it seem as though President Trump himself was personally calling on people to follow him to the Capitol building and then to assault the Capitol building. Here is the BBC Panorama edit compared with the original clip.
We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and I'll be there with you, and we fight.
Oh, this is so bad.
We fight like hell. And if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore. We're going to walk down.
Because it's so fucked up. It's so fucked from the original. Like, look, yeah, here.
To the Capitol. And we're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women.
Fast forward for 50 minutes.
We fight like hell. And if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore.
Okay, well, again, that is insane.
That's hilarious.
Watch that original clip. As you can see, they did it in edit. It looks as though Trump said those things directly one after another, and they had a music bed underneath which connects the first part of the statement to the last part of the statement. It is not as though they had some sort of interpolation from a narrator explaining that much later in the speech, President Trump said this. They didn't do any of that. Well, in a letter from Trump's lawyers, they are asking...
And I'm going to say, like, this shit is why the majority people have zero faith in public media. Like, this is why I know personally, like, the moment that I really started seeing all the bullshit on the news, I just stopped watching the news. I was fairly naive up until I was in the military, actually. I think my time in the military was the big time when I really saw just how bullshit the media's perception is, right? The presentation of the media is. I was deployed, and I was overseas, and I'd be in our DFAC, right, at our dining facility, eating, watching the news, and on the news, they would have there'd be firefights and explosions and trucks and shit on fire everywhere, and I'd look out the window. What do you mean? Where the fuck is that? So it's like it was a 24-hour just negative news cycle, and while bad shit happened over there, it was just frustrating that that was the characterization that was always portrayed. It was never showing any, like, the schools getting rebuilt, none of the humanitarian efforts, none of the days of peace that we were fighting for and we were getting after we were fighting for them. It was just a constant characterization of panic, terror, fear, And like that was frustrating. So that was one of the big reasons why I stopped watching most media, most public news sources, and started trying to find at least news sources that were admittedly slanted. So they would be wholehearted with their slant. I feel like that's the beginning of approaching what public news could be as far as like neutral. I do use a little bit of Ground News. I've been pretty happy with that site as far as just being able to actively track political slant on stories. Highly recommend if you haven't.
For $1 billion unless the documentary is retracted, an apology published, and compensation paid to the president. The broadcaster said in a statement it would respond in due course. This followed hard on a 19-page memo that was put out by a top staffer at the BBC. His name was Michael Prescott. He was an independent advisor to the BBC's Editorial Guidelines and Standards Board. And he wrote a 19-page memo pushing the idea that the BBC had become a biased and ridiculous organization. And here's what he wrote. Dear board members, you may know that I've been one of the 2 independent external advisors working alongside the EGSC. I held this role for 3 years and stood down in the summer. I parted with profound and unresolved concerns about the BBC since leaving. I've thought long and hard about what, if anything, to do about this. My conclusion is that these concerns are serious enough for me to draw them to your attention in your oversight role of the BBC. What follows is a summary of what were, in my view, some of the most troubling matters to come before the EGSC during my term. My view is that the executive repeatedly failed to implement measures to resolve highlighted problems and in many cases simply refused to acknowledge there was an issue at all. So he points out that there has been tremendous bias with regard to the U.S. election. He specifically points out that edit in the Panorama program. He said, quote, this was one of the most shocking sets of issues uncovered during my time with the EGSC. If BBC journalists are allowed to edit video in order to make people say things they never actually said, then what value are the corporation's guidelines? Why should the BBC be trusted? Where will all this end? And yet,
you know where it'll all end? To the death of mainstream media, right? And that's pretty much what we've kind of seen. How like media is now way more divided out. Like people get their media from more sources than ever before. So their lack of trustworthiness has caused them to crumble and caused them to lose their hold on public perception, and that's for the best for everybody. The better, the more we can get people away from biased information online and get people towards at least acknowledging political slant on accredited sources and things like that, the better off we will be as a society going forward.
Top members of the staff said, quote, there was no attempt to mislead the audience about the content or nature of Mr. Trump's speech before the riot at the Capitol. It is a normal practice to edit speeches into short-form clips.
It's a normal practice to edit speeches into clips. Yeah, sure. That was just editing his speech into a clip. A clip where he said shit that he literally didn't say. Oh, shit.
Now, again, this was a repeated thing. So they did this with comments that President Trump made about Liz Cheney. There are reports in which the BBC routinely ignored its own guidelines, giving excessive coverage, for example, to that rogue Iowa poll. You remember right before the election, Ann Seltzer suggested that Kamala Harris was going to win the state by 97 points. And of course, President Trump won the state pretty easily. The coverage was ridiculous. This whistleblower said, quote, during my time as an advisor to the EGSC, it became clear the BBC fell too easily for putting out ill-researched material that suggested issues of racism when there were none. And then he just lists chapter and verse across the BBC in which they basically manufactured a bunch of racial issues where no racial issue existed.
Of course. This is surprising to no one. There's a certain group of people that I swear that is all they do is looking to manufacture racial issues. That lifestyle has got to be fucking exhausting.
Idiocies about biological sex and gender, for example.
I'm not saying it doesn't exist. It's just...
Quote, the desk had been captured by a small group of people promoting the Stonewall view of the debate and keeping other perspectives off the air. Individual programs had come to lack their own reporters as a counterweight. There was a constant drip feed of one-sided stories, usually news features, celebrating the trans experience without adequate balance or objectivity. One example of this, by the way, might be a report that happened in 2024 from the BBC, in which the BBC reported that actually male breast milk was just as nutritious for babies as female breast milk. Now, you may be asking yourself, what is male breast milk? And the answer is that if you pump men full of estrogen, then you will get some secretions from the nipples. That is not actually like female breast milk. But the BBC had an interest in pretending that males can become females, and so they ran with this report.
Now, a transgender woman's milk is just as good for babies as breast milk. That's
Guys, I need to go lay down. I'm sorry. I can't anymore. Oh my. What in the actual fuck are we doing?
according to a letter from the medical director at University Hospital Sussex NHS Foundation Trust. The claim was made as part of a response against campaign groups. The trust referred to studies and the World Health Organization guidance, including one case which found what it called no observable effects in babies fed by induced lactation. Well, to discuss this in a bit more detail, I'm joined now by Kate Luxian, who is a...
Oh no. Oh no. Okay.
Research fellow in creative global health at the University College London and a lactation consultant trainee. I wanted to begin by getting your reaction to what we've heard from the hospital about this.
Of course, and it's actually not very new in terms of a concept or an idea. It's something, as someone who works in LGBT pregnancy and reproduction, that we've known for quite a while. There's studies back in the 90s that talk about the sameness of milk from the birth mother and then the co-lactating mother in terms of 10 days after birth. There's no difference seen there.
Now, again, this was then passed around all over the media. The Sunday Times, the Telegraph, the Daily Mail. Okay, the evidence, shall we say, that male quote-unquote milk, which are just secretions produced by pumping men filled with estrogen, that this is somehow comparable to female milk, is based on one study of one man who pumped himself full of hormones. And the BBC just ran with that. It's ridiculous. But this is what the BBC was, and that's what it is. And that's what so much of legacy media across the water and in the United States is. That's true on a wide variety of issues. It's particularly true about the Hamas-Israel war since the October...
Oh, wow, there's a skip on the tape there. Yeah, I just bumped the record player.
...attacks on Israel. 2 stories a week, okay, which is insane. It's like, how many stories can you retract before you finally lose all credibility? BBC Arabic had to make 215 corrections and clarifications over the past 2 years on
a lot of corrections
that were found to be biased, inaccurate, or misleading. According to the UK Telegraph, the figures follow a week of revelations by the Telegraph of one-sided reporting at the BBC.
No, without more information, though, I don't know if that's actually... Like, I don't know if that's a lot. I mean, 215 corrections, sure, that can sound like a lot, but in a news... Like, in a news space where you're constantly putting out articles, you know, on a daily basis. Yeah, I don't know. I could see over a period of years, you know, quite a few... picking up quite a few incorrect statements. I don't think that'd be that difficult when you act in the news in a political space, like especially, you're spitting quick, right? You're firing from the hip pretty often. So I could see that being, I don't know, I'd have to see more information.
Disclosing in an 8,000-word dossier compiled by a whistleblower that BBC Arabic was choosing to minimize Israeli suffering in the war in Gaza to paint Israel as the aggressor. I mean, why did this happen? Well, the answer is because the BBC despises Israel, and they can't make this any clearer. It's not possible for them to make it any clearer. For example, here is the BBC editor, Jeremy Bowen. This is in November 2023. He falsely reported that Israel had blown up the Al-Ahli hospital in the Gaza Strip, and it was just not true. It was not true at all. He admits he got it wrong, but says he doesn't feel bad at all that he got it wrong. Like at all. He did a great job. Here we go.
Tell us what happened that night, and, you know, bluntly, where were you getting your information, and do you regret anything that you said that night?
So it broke in, I suppose, mid-evening. And to answer your question, no, I don't regret one thing in my reporting, because I think I was measured throughout. I didn't race to judgment.
But you said that building had been flattened.
Oh yeah, well, I got that wrong because I was looking at the pictures, and like what I could see was a square that appeared to be flaming on all sides, and there was a, you know, sort of a void in the middle. And it was, I think it was a picture taken from a drone. And so, you know, we have to piece together what we see.
So you didn't even know what the fuck you were looking at. You had no idea what the fuck you were looking at. And you put down it's a flattened building. Okay.
And I thought, well, that looks like the whole building's gone. And that was my conclusion from looking at the pictures, and I was wrong on that. But I don't feel particularly bad about that.
He doesn't feel bad. It doesn't feel bad at all, because this is the way the BBC operates. They start with the conclusion, and then they backfill the news in order to reach that particular conclusion. So is it any surprise that the BBC is a disaster area, or that they're in serious trouble now? No, it is not. And it is long past time.
Yeah, I'd say all of these media sources that I think you can actually see it, you know, if you pull up in any of them, they're all trending downward. I think, like I was talking about earlier, how most people have, they've diversified their source of news coming in, their source of political information, you know, and all these things. I think it's only really like super boomers that still watch the news. Because honestly, you know, I live around with people that are in varying age groups, so I see it's like, you know, certain people over a certain age, yeah, they still watch TV, but even, you know, even just the younger boomers don't. They've started getting their news as well from non-traditional news outlets, so they're losing their grasp on people for sure.
The BBC to admit what it is, which is an agitprop organization on behalf of the political left. They have been
and its actions, like
nothing has changed.
It's like this misquoting, this like framing of Trump here is, this shit radicalizes people more than anything else out there, because it's so very brazenly lying to people's face. Like, that is what this is. So when you do that, that's what's going to radicalize people. Because you're very obviously, you have no respect for them or their opinion if you're willing to lie to them at this, to this length and in this reframing.
And this latest brouhaha is just more evidence that actually, the government should not be subsidizing media organizations like an NPR or like a PBS, or in Britain, like the BBC, because you just end up with left-wing media sponsored by taxpayers. Okay.
Did he say that this is sponsored by tax? Wait a second. No shot. Taxpayers paid for them to splice Trump's video? Wait, what? Hold up. I maybe I don't understand. Well, obviously it's not paid for by US. Because it's mainly funded by UK's TV license fee, paid for by households there, not taxes, along with commercial revenue from its international operations like BBC Studios. It does not receive direct funding from US taxpayer. I didn't ask about US. I mean, obviously we'd be talking about British taxpayers, not US taxpayers. Why would... Oh, never mind. Okay, actually, it is from our taxpayers. Wait, what? Okay, so they have received grants from the U.S. Agency for International Development, USAID, amounting to about 8% of the charity's income from 2023 to 2024, or roughly 2.6 million euros, right? Or is that pounds? Whatever. This funding supports specific projects like journalism training and humanitarian media efforts, but it's separate from the BBC core broadcasting operations. Still, holy shit! Almost 10% of the BBC's funding is actually coming in from American taxpayer dollars. Huh? I was memeing. I was joking around. I didn't think there was ever a world in which U.S. taxpayer dollars were actually paying for the BBC, but that's apparently what the fuck's going on here.